Welcome to this explainer. Okay, have you ever actually wondered how we know things? Like how we know for sure that bacteria cause disease or that some brand new cultivation technique actually works? We hear the phrase scientific method all the time, and right away we kind of picture these isolated people in stuffy white lab coats. But today we're totally demystifying it. We're going to look at the scientific method not as some dusty, abstract academic concept, but as literally the ultimate practical tool for everyday critical thinking. So let's just break down exactly how it works.
Let's kick things off with a highly specific, kind of quirky scenario. Imagine you're growing cannabis, right? And someone tells you, with absolute certainty, that playing classical music to your plants is going to increase their yield by 20%. I mean, sounds amazing, doesn't it? But should you actually believe it? Some people will just instantly accept it because, well, it sounds fun, while others will completely reject it because it just sounds ridiculous. But a scientist goes on an investigator's journey. They strip away all that noise and just ask one simple question. Does playing classical music actually increase cannabis yield? That single question is where our whole journey begins.
Okay, let's dive into this. To solve our classical music mystery, we're going to follow 6 key steps. We've got 1, the spark of curiosity. 2, formulating a testable hypothesis. 3, the controlled experiment. 4, data and statistical analysis. 5, peer review and replication. And finally 6, thinking like a scientist.
All right, starting off with step 1, the spark of curiosity.
You see, science doesn't start in a lab coat. It starts with pure, genuine curiosity. Long before any actual experiments happen, a scientist might observe something kind of unusual. Or maybe they notice a pattern in nature and they just ask, wait, why does that happen? These observations, they can come from anywhere: nature, previous studies, happy accidents, or just your everyday experiences. Instead of just blindly accepting or rejecting claims, like say Mozart making our plants grow massive, a scientist leans in with real curiosity.
Literally every major scientific discovery begins with everyday questions. Let's stick with cannabis cultivation for a second. Why do some cultivars produce way more terpenes than others? Or why do some plants stretch so much during flowering? Why do certain pests suddenly become resistant to our pesticides? Once you ask a really specific question like one of these, you can start digging into the existing scientific literature. You want to see if somebody else has already solved this mystery. Or hey, maybe you've stumbled onto an opportunity for some brand new research.
Which brings us to step 2, formulating a testable hypothesis.
A hypothesis is an educated prediction that can be tested through observation or experimentation. Notice that word there, educated. So the crucial point is, it is absolutely not a random guess. It's an informed statement built directly on the research you just did. And the golden rule here? A true hypothesis has to be something you can actually test.
Take a look at this statement. Music makes plants happy. I mean, how do you even measure a plant's happiness? You can't, right? That makes it completely untestable. But if we say cannabis exposed to classical music produces greater biomass, boom, that is highly testable. We can actually measure that. If a claim cannot be measured and investigated, it basically sits entirely outside the realm of science. Science deals only with what we can measure.
Moving right along to step 3, the controlled experiment.
Now, this isn't where science begins, but it's where we actually test our ideas by isolating variables. To test our classical music hypothesis, we'd set up 2 groups of genetically identical cannabis plants. The experimental group gets the special treatment, so they're jamming out to classical music. Meanwhile, the control group remains in total, absolute silence. Without this silent, untreated baseline, it would be literally impossible to know if the music actually caused any changes we might see later on.
But to make this work, the environment has to be incredibly strict. Both of these groups must receive exactly the same light intensity, the exact same temperature, humidity, nutrients, water, and they have to be in the same growing medium. It's the whole shebang. By rigidly controlling all of these other factors, we ensure that the only difference between our 2 groups is the music. We have successfully isolated our single variable.
And that leads us to step 4, data and statistical analysis.
Now, getting here requires a massive shift in your mindset. We have to replace our opinions with hard measurements. Look, anyone can walk into a grow room and just say, "Oh, I think these plants look healthier." And this brilliantly illustrates the difference, because the scientists will walk in and ask, okay, how much healthier? And how exactly do we measure it? Good science relies on solid, concrete data. Things like plant height, root mass, or cannabinoid concentration. It absolutely does not rely on human intuition.
So, imagine our experiment is finally over, and we weigh the total biomass. The plants that listened to the music produced 510 grams, and the control plants?
they produced 500 grams. Okay, so the music plants yielded slightly more. They are pretty close, but does that mean we have a real, genuine breakthrough on our hands?
Well, this brings us to a really critical question. Is a 10-gram difference actually significant? I mean, maybe the music worked, or maybe those specific plants just happened to absorb a tiny bit more water by pure random chance. This right here is why statistical analysis is non-negotiable. It's what separates genuine, meaningful results from just dumb luck. It also completely highlights why large sample sizes are so absolutely crucial. The more data we collect, the more reliable our conclusions are going to be.
All right, let's jump to the post-experiment phase, step 5, peer review and replication.
Okay, get ready for a bit of an anticlimax twist here. Ready? Scientists do not prove hypotheses. Nope, they either support them or they fail to support them. A single study rarely, if ever, provides absolute certainty. Science is always open to revision the second new evidence comes along. So we don't prove the music works forever and always, we just say, hey, the current evidence either supports or fails to support this idea.
Now, before a study is ever published in a journal, it goes through something called peer review. This is where independent experts thoroughly check the methodology, the statistics, the logic, and the overall interpretation. They are actively looking for mistakes. Now, peer review isn't perfect, but it acts as a really vital quality control system. By rigorously scrutinizing the research, the scientific community drastically reduces the risk of false conclusions making their way out into the public sphere. But perhaps the absolute most important step in this whole method is replication. A discovery isn't truly solid until it's been repeated. Imagine 10 independent laboratories run our exact same classical music experiment. If 9 out of 10 of them get similar results, wow, our confidence in that discovery skyrockets. But if none of them can reproduce our little 10-gram increase, well, our original conclusion becomes highly, highly questionable. As the saying goes, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
And finally, we arrive at the climax of our journey. Step 6. Thinking like a scientist.
Let's rapidly review the core actions we just took. We observe, hypothesize, experiment, analyze, and conclude. And remember, this framework isn't just locked away for people in laboratories. If you're a cultivator trying out a new fertilizer, or even just a consumer evaluating some flashy marketing claim on a product you want to buy, you can use this exact objective framework. It's going to help you quickly separate fact from opinion and hard evidence from what is really just a cool anecdote. You know, there's a massive misconception out there. People tend to think science is all about proving that you are right. But in reality, good scientists actually search for evidence that could disprove their own ideas. Yeah, science is very often about discovering that you were actually wrong. The goal is never just to defend a belief. The goal is to find the truth.
In a world that is honestly completely filled with misinformation right now, this objective framework is more important than it has ever been. So the next time you hear a claim that sounds just a little too good to be true, like, I don't know, classical music drastically boosting your crop yield, remember the single most powerful question you can ask: what evidence supports it? Science doesn't ask us to blindly believe. It asks us to investigate. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today. Now get out there and ask some questions.